3 lives, 3 worlds, Lotus steps. Wherever step goes, Lotus blooms. Divine prayer. Lotus Step Chapter 25, Book 2. The army of the Shi dynasty returned to the court on the 7th day of the first lunar month. The Imperial Guard followed His Highness the Third Highness to join the army 2 days in advance and led the army in triumph back to Pingan City. 10 days ago, Lian San broke Emperor Zhaoxi's seal at Lingquan, and Zhaoxi left immediately after recovering her magic power. They all knew where Zhaoxi was going, but Lian San didn't stop him or ask about it. The Imperial Master couldn't guess what the Third Highness was thinking, so he chased Zhaoxi to the edge of the dense forest and warned him, "You and the princess are really not suitable, so don't mess around." Zhaoxi just looked at him sarcastically. He smiled, as if he thought it was funny for an outsider to talk to him about this matter, and left before he could say anything else. After Zhaoxi left, Lian San stayed in the dense forest for 3 days, during which time Xia Gujua came. Because the cave in the forest was destroyed by the Third Highness, there was no place to entertain guests, so the two could only talk outside the cave. After hearing this, the Imperial Master felt that the main content of this conversation was that His Highness the Third Highness asked Xia Guzhu to go to Juchangshan to bring a message to Taichan Palace, asking Emperor Dong Hua to meet him in the mortal world after his retreat. The Imperial Master pondered for a while and felt that His Highness the Third Highness should want to hand over the matter of God Zuti to Emperor Dong Hua. The Imperial Master is a person who pays attention to the beginning and the end of his work. He has never tried to do half of the work and handed it over to others halfway, so he can't help but feel reluctant to give up. After Xie Gula left, the Imperial Master tentatively asked Lian San, "Your Highness, are you not planning to continue looking for the god Zuti?" After asking this question, he remembered, Di Zhaoxi said that the god Zuti turned into red that day. Lotus seeds were planted by God Mo Yuan and went to the southern wilderness. He suddenly realized, "Your Highness cannot go to the world now, so it is naturally inconvenient to look for it. You should really leave this matter to others." He asked and answered for a long time. His Highness was soaking in the spiritual spring. He only raised his eyelids slightly and corrected him. It was Zuti's breath that turned into red lotus seeds, not Zuti who turned into red lotus seeds. The Imperial Master was a little confused, but he thought he had understood Zhaoxi's words before and clarified the relationship between the two, since it was transformed by the spiritual breath of the god Zuti, after the god Zuti turned into light. He never left any trace in this world. Besides, logically speaking, all hopes for the resurrection of god Zuti can only be pinned on that red lotus seed. The red lotus seed is god Zuti, and the god Zuti is the red lotus seed. There seems to be nothing wrong with that. His Highness the Third Highness was noncommittal. "Zhao, she also wants me to think so," he said, expressionlessly, leaning on the wall of the pool with one hand, "just because he wants me to think so. I feel that spiritual breath is spiritual breath, Zuti is Zuti. Red lotus seed is not in southern wilderness at this time, and Zuti is not in southern wilderness at this time. Even if Zuti is resurrected, she is resurrected from the light and has nothing to do with Hong lotus seed." The Imperial Master murmured, "Since the traces of god Zuti cannot be found through the red lotus seeds, His Highness has been pursuing the whereabouts of the red lotus seeds." His Highness the Third Prince said calmly, "If I hadn't looked for the red lotus seeds and hadn't awakened Emperor Zhaoxi, I wouldn't have known that Zuti's whereabouts had nothing to do with the red lotus seeds." The Imperial Master was suffocated, and he went through what they had done along the way in his mind, and found that it was indeed the case. However, Lian San's speculation about Zuti's true identity at this time was beyond the intellectual scope of the Imperial Master. It should be noted that when the Master is with mortals, he is usually the one who makes the mortals feel that what he says is beyond their intellectual scope. The Imperial Master felt the pain of a turning of events. He half-covered his face and asked, "Your Highness means that Emperor Zhaoxi lied to us and actually didn't tell us anything useful, right?" "It's not like he didn't tell us anything." Lian San glanced at him. At least judging from his attitude, god Zuti should be safe, and there is no need for me to provide extra help. The Imperial Master thought about it and recalled that a few months ago, Lian San went to the thoroughfare formation to look for clues about Zhu Ti according to the Mingxi notes sent by Xie Guzhi. After returning to the capital, he had a conversation with him. At that time, Lian San once speculated that Zhu Ti would be reborn here in the mortal world. Your Highness still thinks that God Zhu Ti is reborn in our mortal world, right? The Imperial Master was a little unsure. Then do I need to follow Emperor Zhaoxi? Although he is cunning and articulate, there is no guarantee that he will be able to do it one day. No clues will be revealed. No need. His Highness the Third Highness looked up at the ancient trees on the top, with a hint of interest and boredom in his expression. I don't have to know where Zhu Ti is. He rubbed his forehead. This matter, it's complicated, and it's not my responsibility to deal with it in the first place. It's enough to do this, and the Emperor will handle it in the future. His Highness the Third did not like to take over things, and the Imperial Master actually did not like to do things that much. Although he regretted giving up halfway, in general he agreed with Lian San's point of view and felt that the matter should end here. Just as he was about to retreat, he heard the mist from Lingquan, and His Highness the Third Prince suddenly said to him, "After returning to the capital, you should watch Yanlan more." Lian San's command sounded a bit abrupt at first. When the Imperial Master thought deeply, he was startled and was speechless for a long time. What your Highness means is that the spiritual breath of God Zhu Ti was planted by God Mo Yuan in the southern wilderness. Red Lotus seed, maybe Fairy Chang'e, no, Princess Yanlan? 9 times out of 10. His Highness the Third Highness replied to him calmly, as if he was recounting a very ordinary thing. Nan Wang, Honglian, and a pair of good bones can easily cultivate into an immortal body. Apart from her, there is no one else. Someone else. The Imperial Master took a breath of cold air. Since Princess Yanlan is the spirit breath from back then, he failed to control his imagination. If the ancestor god is resurrected from the light again, will he be reborn in the smoke? Princess Lan, or, he said, unable to calmly, the current Princess Yanlan is actually the ancestor god who has not yet awakened and returned to her throne. The Third Highness did not directly answer his speculation and only said the word maybe, as if because he had planned not to care about this matter anymore, he really no longer cared about it and did not care about verifying whether Yanlan was Zhu Ti. He also completely lost interest. He could remember that instructing the Imperial Master to protect her was the last responsibility he could fulfill. The Imperial Master could only resign, but there was a huge wave surging in his heart, and he could not calm down for a long time. This battle with Beiwei Fosher is of great significance. It can ensure the stability of the western and northern borders of Daxi for decades. Even if the Emperor rules from the throne, the prosperous age is just around the corner. Therefore, on the day when the army returns to the dynasty, the Emperor is extremely pleased, and personally he went out of the city to welcome him and held a banquet in the Danhui Tower in the palace that night to entertain the heroes. The banquet ended at midnight, and the ministers and servants left Danhui Tower in twos and twos. The Imperial Master had a few too many drinks tonight and was not thinking clearly. At that time, Liao Peiying, the editor of the Hanlin Academy, passed by him and His Highness the Third Highness. Xiao Liao greeted him and Lian San respectfully. The Imperial Master remembered that Liao Xiuzhuan also knew Cheng Yu, so he talked to Xiao Liao in confusion. Liao Han said, "The last time I saw you, I was appraising the paintings of the princesses. You asked Princess Hong Yu for a copybook. Did you get it? Is the copybook to your liking?" Without waiting for Xiao Liao to answer, he asked again. He added, "By the way, how are you doing, princess?" Xiao Liao, who was about to answer, heard that the Imperial Preceptor asked how Chen Yu was doing. He was silent for a moment, with a strange look on his face. "Don't you know, Imperial Preceptor, that the princess has gone to Wunuosu to get married?" "Marriage?" The Imperial Master was startled, suddenly woke up from the wine, and immediately looked at Lian San beside him. The Imperial Master could not see any change in His Highness's expression. He was quiet for a while, and then asked Liao Peiying quietly, "What's going on with the marriage?" Liao Peiying was a little stunned. "Don't you know, the general?" she said with a lonely look. in the Battle of Shiwei, in order to enable Wu Nuosu to successfully form an alliance with Dashi, the princess voluntarily proposed to marry Wu Nuosu. Fourth Prince Minda, the marriage team left Beijing on the 17th day of the 12th lunar month and has been in Beijing for 20 days. After saying this, Liao Peiying paused and added, "The princess's righteousness is a role model for the children of the clan." Although he was praising Qingyu, his voice could not conceal his sadness and disappointment. The imperial master could tell that it was Liao Xiaozhuan's feelings for Qingyu. The expression of His Highness the Third Prince seemed blank for a moment, and the imperial master did not see it too clearly. Liao Xiaozhuan bowed his hands and bid farewell to the two of them. The imperial master nodded and returned the salute. He turned his head and looked at Lian San for a moment, only to see that he was doing everything as usual, just looking into the distance silently, not knowing what he was thinking. The imperial master followed his gaze and saw a plum forest in the distance. The next day the emperor summoned Lian San, and the imperial master was also present. In the royal study, the emperor and his ministers exchanged a few words, and the emperor took the initiative to mention Chengyu's marriage. Chang Yun expressed his helplessness, saying that the fourth Prince Minda took the initiative to propose marriage, and had already rejected Crown Prince Wu Nuosu's proposal to marry Yanlan. If he refused Minda again, he might not only be unable to form an alliance with Wu Nuosu, but also become enemies. Therefore, he had no choice but to agree to the marriage. Only then did the imperial master know the inside story of Chengyu's marriage. He was an important minister of the two dynasties and was deeply respected and loved by the emperor, so he always spoke neatly and without any roundabouts when talking to the emperor. The imperial master frowned. "I originally thought that because of His Majesty's love for Princess Hongyu, under this situation, he would send the 19th princess to Wu Nuosu to get married, instead of leaving the princess to marry far away." Chang Yun pondered for a moment. When the general rushed to rescue Guidan, he ordered the national advisor to take good care of Gu Yanlan. "The general is fighting desperately on the front line. Naturally, I can't let the general have worries." After a pause, "Besides, Hongyu is very sensible. Knowing my dilemma, I took the initiative to agree to this marriage in order to relieve the country's crisis." The unmissable words left the imperial master speechless. Indeed, Wu Nuosu was only interested in Qingyu and Yanlan, and Shiwu was getting married, so only these two girls could go. Lian San wanted to look after Gu Yanlan, and from the emperor's point of view, when he made this choice between the two, he ordered Qingyu to go and get married, but he betrayed Lian San's great affection. The emperor's handling of this matter was indeed inappropriate. But is this really the choice of His Highness, and is it the result he wants to see? Before the imperial master could figure out the reason, he spoke 3 times. His Highness the Third Highness replied to the emperor in a steady voice, "Thank you for taking care of Yanlan, Your Majesty. I am very grateful for your kindness." He did not mention a word about Qingyu. The two of them walked out of the emperor's study. The imperial master thought about it again and again, but finally couldn't hold it back and asked Lian San, "I also know that Your Highness came to this life to ensure that Princess Yanlan returned to the 9 heavens and ascended to the throne of God. Therefore, we cannot let the princess who is in poor health go to that bitter cold place. But does Your Highness trust the princess to go? The princess has been growing up in the capital since she was a child. Although her health is good, she may not be able to withstand the torture. Why don't we think about it again? I wonder if there is any way to make the princess." Lian San interrupted him and said calmly, "Since I made my choice that night, I will have nothing to do with her from now on. Whether she marries Ji Mingfeng or Minda, it is her destiny as a mortal." Destiny. Mortals have their own destiny, and I won't bother with it. The imperial master was stunned. The truth is indeed this truth. These words were calm and sensible. As His Highness the Third Highness said, now that he has made his choice, he should clearly draw a clear line with Qingyu. But if you really like someone, can you really face your sweetheart's distant marriage so calmly and indifferently? The imperial master suddenly remembered what Emperor Zhaoxi said that night at the entrance of the cave in the Great Abyss Forest. Jiaoxi said to him, "If you really know him well, you should know that his love is worthless. As for sincerity, he is about 3/3 sincere to Au, not more." He thought of that night again. Lian San's words, "Maybe I really don't like her that much." The imperial master looked at Lian San's leaving figure and was speechless for a moment. For the first time, he understood why many people said that Lian San was ruthless. It was also the first time that he truly felt that the heart of His Highness was actually a bit ruthless. Chang Yu is dreaming. In the dream, she was heading to Wunuosu to get married. The wedding team left Beijing on the 17th day of the 12th lunar month and traveled quickly. 10 days later, they arrived at Diamugwan, the western gate of the Shi dynasty. Leaving Diamugwan in the west is the Jiangwei Desert. The desert was barren and sparsely populated, so the imperial court did not set up an official office, but generally incorporated the desert into Jijuan, with the governor of Jijuan acting as pastoralist for the emperor. It was difficult for horses to cross the sandy sea, so the escorting team exchanged for the camel team prepared for them by the governor of Jijuan at Diamugwan. Leaving Diamugwan and entering the desert, all you see are continuous sand dunes. After walking for 3 or 4 days, you finally see an oasis. Some small oases have villages set up to provide supplies for camel teams, but in more oases, there are only some scattered ruins, and the appearance of cities can be vaguely discerned. The general who escorted Cheng Yu to get married was named Li. He had served on the border before and knew the Jiangwei Desert quite well. General Li told Cheng Yu that there are many stories in the desert, many crises lurk, and there is also a lot of vitality. A quicksand can wipe out a tribe, and a water source can resurrect an ethnic group. Cheng Yu looked far away at the vast yellow sand and asked generally, since water represents life, then everyone in the desert should like water very much? General Li shook his head. Not necessarily. As the princess knows, this desert was also very prosperous in the past. The Salt Lake Delta area located in the center of the desert was even more prosperous and fertile. At the beginning of the dynasty, Emperor Gaozu also lived and there was a county there. However, one year during the night of Jiangwei, there was a sudden flood in the desert. The entire Jiangwei Desert was occupied by floods overnight. Under the torrential torrent, all the prosperity disappeared overnight. From then on, the court knew it was unable to control the development of this desert, and then it was left abandoned. Qingyu listened to this old story from more than 200 years ago as if she was listening to a distant legend. At that time, she did not take it seriously. But who could have expected that on the third night after this conversation ended, they would encounter a flood in the Jiangwei Desert that only happened once in 200 years. The sand trembled and the camel bells were in panic. Under the crimson moon, a torrent emerged from nowhere, carrying the yellow sand and rushing towards the camel caravan, sending off the bride. It was like a vicious and cunning beast, walking at an elegant pace unhurriedly. The ground devours the hills one after another around it, in order to frighten the prey wherever it looks. There were floods on all sides, and the nearly 1,000 people in the send-off team were like lambs surrounded by beasts. Chang Yu hurriedly looked for Zhu Hibiscus, Li Xiang, Yao Huang, and Ziyut, and among the desperate fleeing crowds, thinking dimly in his mind. Now, in the face of this predicament that is like a punishment from heaven, it is impossible for them to be rescued by human power alone. With the power of the flower demons, they may be able to solve this crisis. But she ran until her legs were broken, and she screamed until her voice became hoarse, but there was no trace of the flower demons anywhere. Just when she was filled with despair, 2 guards found her and dragged her to the highest sand dune. The guards helped her stand firm on the high hill. She turned around and looked back, and saw that the rushing torrent suddenly swallowed up the camel team at the foot of the hill. The little camel team guide who had been playing with her a few days ago, the daughter cried and begged her for help. "Sister princess, save me." She immediately rushed down the sand dune, but unexpectedly a wave came and the little girl disappeared in the turbid current. She couldn't help but yell, "No." Then she woke up gasping for air. Someone held her hand and whispered comforting words in her ear. "It's okay, Au, it's okay." Chang Yu opened her eyes and saw the figure in white clothes nearby in the hazy firelight. She instinctively whispered, "Brother Lensan." The man lowered his head and looked at her intently. For a long time, his voice became hoarse. "You're still thinking about him." Chang Yu was startled and tried to open her eyes. Then she saw clearly that the person sitting next to her, holding her hand and comforting her, was not Lian Song, but Ji Mingfeng. The memory comes back in an instant. After coming back to his senses, Cheng Yufeng recalled that the dream just now was a dream and not a dream. Everything that happened in the dream was real. The ominous crimson moon, the devouring flood peaks, the war and chaos, the people turning on their backs, the hell on earth. When she stood on the high hill and watched the 6-year-old girl being swallowed by the torrent, the thread that had been trembling in her heart to support the last trace of reason suddenly broke. She suddenly collapsed, shook off the guard's blocking hand, and was about to jump into the torrent to save the child. Just when she was ignoring her, under the crimson moon, in the distance where the torrent stretched, a young man in white suddenly came riding the waves. The young man formed the lotus seal with one hand, and silver light spread out from his fingers, covering the entire earth in an instant. Wherever the silver light passed, the hell built by sand floods stopped inch by inch. The young man raised his hand slightly, and the camel team and the little girl who were buried in the torrent seemed to be wrapped up by something strong. They suddenly jumped out of the mud and fell on the hillock, gasping and coughing. Seeing that everyone had been saved, Cheng Yu's heart suddenly dropped. His emotions were ups and downs, and he fainted before he could really see the young man's face clearly. Now when they woke up, they realized that the person who saved them from death at the critical moment was actually Ji Mingfeng. After Ji Shixi said something like an accusation, "You are still thinking about him," he seemed to realize that he had made a mistake and did not continue the topic. He only told Cheng Yu, who slowly sat up in a gentle voice, that at this time they were resting. It is a grotto on a nearby sand mountain. The flood had receded, and Zhu Jin and Li Xiang were all fine. He also saved the rest of the people who were traveling with him. However, he arrived a little late after all, so he let the quicksand take away dozens of soldiers and a dozen camels. Hearing that some soldiers were killed, Cheng Yu was stunned for a while. Then, she clasped her hands and thanked Ji Mingfeng with a big gift, saying that being able to save most of the people was a good result that she didn't dare to think of. Ji Mingfeng blocked her gift and helped her pale face to lean on the stone bed again. As if she just remembered, she asked how Ji Mingfeng could arrive in such time and use such powerful magic. Save them before such a natural disaster. Ji Mingfeng answered her in a scribble that it was because he had an adventure a few days ago. She didn't ask any more questions, just nodded and accepted the statement. The cave soon became quiet, except for the burning sticks in the bonfire in front of the cave entrance, which occasionally made the sound of peeling, disturbing the tranquility of the night. Cheng Yu looked at the bonfire with empty eyes. The rest of the life after the disaster was supposed to be a sentimental moment, whether she was afraid or thankful. After all, it should not be as calm as she was right now. She and Ji Mingfeng should also have a lot to talk about. Where's the escort team camping at this time? How much material has been lost? Whether they can set off tomorrow, and whether the route needs to be adjusted. There are actually many things that she needs to care about. But even Cheng Yu himself couldn't understand why he didn't have the slightest desire to care about him or other things at this time, and there was only an emptiness in his heart. While Cheng Yu stared blankly at the bonfire, Ji Mingfeng also looked at her momentarily. After a long time, Prince Ji spoke, breaking the silence between the two. He asked her, "Are you disappointed, Ayu?" "Disappointed?" Cheng Yu turned to look at Ji Mingfeng in confusion and repeated as if she didn't understand, "You mean disappointed?" Then she quickly denied it, "I'm not." Although she answered like this, she still felt in her heart the heart that was as rippleless as a mirror lake suddenly started beating violently. Ji Mingfeng looked at her for a while, then pursed his lips slightly, a very subtle movement, with a hint of bitterness that was hard to detect. "You are indeed disappointed." He spoke each word with clear eyes as if he could see through her. From the bottom of my heart, you are disappointed that when you were in danger, it was me who came to save you, not Lian-san. The moment Ji Mingfeng said these words, Qingyu's heart jumped suddenly as if weightless. She was stunned. Only then did she know why she was so abnormal after the disaster. It turned out to be because of this. This was the correct answer, but it was an answer that she didn't want to, couldn't admit, and had no face-to-face. Am I right? Ji Mingfeng frowned and looked at her. He was right, but she couldn't answer him. Her silence was the best answer. She couldn't tell whether Ji Mingfeng was angry or not. He just stopped looking at her. He turned his head, and his eyes stayed in the dark night outside the cave, as if he was thinking about something. After a long time, he turned back again, as if he had made up his mind, and raised his hand. With that simple movement, a huge water mirror appeared in midair, occupying almost half of the cave. Ji Mingfeng looked at her, still frowning, but his voice was gentle and persuasive. I know it's hard to give up on him, but he doesn't care about you anymore. But you can't give up. It's painful. It will only be you. Ayu, if you still can't wake up, let me help you. After saying this, Ji Mingfeng stood up, raised his finger and gently touched the water mirror in midair, and saw that the fog in the mirror dispersed and a snow forest appeared. Chang Yu recognized it. It was the general's mansion. The snow forest, now full of ice and snow and no longer in autumn colors, is the maple leaf forest she had visited before. In the middle of winter, the dazzling red leaves on the branches have receded, and only the rugged branches are covered with ice and snow, creating a mysterious feeling. In this icy and snowy land that was full of mystery, Chang Yu saw the long-lost Lian-song, as well as the Imperial Master and Yanlan. Chang Yu stared at the mirror steadily. It was a snowy and sunny day. There was a white jade table in the snow forest, and Lian-san and the Imperial Master were sitting opposite each other playing chess. Yanlan wore a goose-yellow lotus cloak trimmed with white fox fur and sat beside Lian-song. The goose-yellow color makes her skin white and moist, and her energy is good. A small temporary stone platform was set up on Yanlan's right side to facilitate her making tea. Tea smoke curled up on the stone table, and the smoke lifted the teapot to distribute the tea. After the tea was distributed, he carefully picked up a white glazed cup filled with tea soup and handed it to Lian-song. Lian-song took a sip and put the empty cup back into Yanlan's hand. His gaze has been fixed on the chess table without raising his head, but one person returns the cup and the other receives the cup. The movements of returning the cup are skillful and the movements of receiving the cup are smooth, just like Yanlan has handed him tea thousands of times. And he has returned the cup thousands of times to have such a tacit understanding. Not long after, Tianbu appeared in the mirror, breaking the silent scene. Tianbu stepped forward with frowning eyebrows and whispered softly, saying that Hua Feiwu from Linling Pavilion came to see him and wanted to discuss matters related to the princess with His Highness. In front of the water mirror, Chang Yu shook his right hand hard and stared at Lian-san for a moment, as if he wanted to see every change in his expression. But the expression on His Highness's face did not change at all. He held a white piece in his hand and seemed to be thinking about the chess move. He calmly told Tianbu, "No, let her go back." Yanlan's shower pot paused, and a faint smile appeared on his lips. Tianbu said respectfully and stepped back. The white piece in Lian-song's hand fell at this moment, killing the Imperial Master's dragon in one step. On the chess table, the black pieces were in decline. The Imperial Master threw away the chess pieces in his hand and complained, "I can't play anymore. I'm not lucky today. I always lose to Your Highness. There's no point in playing anymore. I'd better wait for luck to come another day. Come and ask for advice from His Highness again." After saying that, he stood up. Yanlan smiled and said, "If you don't play chess, the Imperial Master can also enjoy the snow scenery here. I just stewed the soup in the small kitchen and asked the maids to guard it. It will be ready to drink in a quarter of an hour." The Imperial Master raised his eyebrows. "Princess, this soup is not stewed for me to drink. I don't know whether the princess is really keeping someone here or pretending to keep him. If I really stay and drink the soup, maybe the princess will be angry with me. If you wink, I won't take this trouble anymore. Yanlan blushed and feigned annoyance. Master, why are you teasing Yanlan? He glanced shyly at Lian San beside him. Qinyu didn't want to look anymore. It turned out that he really didn't care about her, and her departure didn't stir up even a ripple in his heart. She closed her eyes suddenly, her limbs cold and cold. But she couldn't help it. Even so, she still wanted to know more. Finally, she opened her eyes. The scene in the water mirror had changed, but it was outside the general's mansion. In the mirror, the imperial master was walking out of the general's mansion. He saw Hua Feiwu waiting at the door. After hesitating for a moment, he took the initiative to ask, "Are you Hua Feiwu from Linling Pavilion?" Xiaohua nodded. The imperial master sighed and looked at her. "The general said he wouldn't see you. Why are you still here?" Xiaohua was holding a small package in her hand. She looked at the imperial master in Taoist robes for a moment and asked hesitantly, "Are you the general's good friend, the imperial master?" Xiaohua has been cautious all her life at this moment. Seeing the imperial master nodding, he lowered his guard, but he still thought about it again and finally came up with a sentence. "I am a friend of the princess. The princess went to Wunuosu to get married. I am really worried. I thought the general has a good relationship with the princess, and I would like to ask the general to help find a way to see if the princess can come back. But the slave has been waiting here for a long time, and the general has not seen the slave." "I don't know." The imperial preceptor interrupted her. "It seems that you also know what happened between the princess and the general." Xiehua's lifelong acumen was used at this moment. She only stayed for a moment, and then she immediately reacted. She softly said, and half hidden her mouth, so the imperial master also said, "The princess and I are also friends." He raised his eyes to Xiaohua and said kindly, "But you don't have to waste your time here. Go back, the general won't see you. The choice has been made, and from now on it will be a bridge back to the bridge with the princess, and he will not interfere in the princess's affairs." Xiaohua was stunned and murmured, "Why? But doesn't he like our princess?" The imperial master sighed. "I personally asked the general about this, and he said." Xiaohua asked anxiously, "What did he say?" The imperial preceptor was silent for a moment. "General," he said, with some pity, he said that maybe he didn't like the princess that much. It doesn't matter whether the princess marries Minda or anyone else. It's her destiny. It's inconvenient for him. Interfering with each other. Xiaohua froze there in disbelief. The small package in her hand fell to the ground. The package spread out, revealing a sachet and several pages of scriptures. The imperial master leaned over to pack up the scattered packages, picked them up, and handed them to Xiaohua again, then shook his head and left with a sigh. The fog slowly gathered, blocking the picture in the mirror. A silver light flashed through, and the water mirror gradually disappeared. Qingyu sat on the stone bed in a daze. Ji Mingfeng put away the water mirror and returned to her side. "I didn't lie to you," he said. 5 words without beginning or end, but what Ji Mingfeng said, Chengyu immediately understood. What he meant was that everything in the water mirror was what really happened in Ping in city thousands of miles away, and was not what he meant. Create a phantom to deceive and fool her. "I know you didn't lie to me. You won't lie to others." She answered him, her voice hoarse. As soon as the words left his mouth, 2 tears fell down the end of his eyes. She noticed it, and as if she felt embarrassed, she immediately reached out and wiped away the 2 tears. But the tears were uncontrollable and could not be wiped away. Her hands were full of tears. She frowned and gave up. When she looked up, she saw Ji Mingfeng's worried eyes. She was silent for a moment, and then she took the initiative to speak. "Actually, I have never been willing to give in," she whispered. "At that time, the emperor wanted me to get married, and I agreed so happily because I wanted to see his reaction. Deep down in my heart, I still didn't believe that he was just marrying me. As a pastime, I have always stubbornly believed that I am different from him." Tears kept overflowing from the corners of her eyes. Such many tears were the result of heartbreak, but her voice was very calm. "I want to see his reaction after learning that I will marry far away. I hope he will be sad and regretful. Like holding a knife and inserting it into the deepest part of her soul, she calmly analyzed herself, even if the analysis involved bone cutting. Physical pain. Yanlan said he didn't like me that much, which made me feel bad, so I wanted to do something to make him feel bad too. But it turns out that I am really ridiculous. When talking about being ridiculous, the corners of his mouth raised slightly, as if he really thought he was ridiculous and couldn't help but laugh at himself. Ji Mingfeng looked at her pretending to be calm and wanted to wipe away her tears, smooth out the slight curve of the corners of her lips, and tell her that she was not ridiculous. But before he made any move, she had closed her eyes and turned her face to the inside of the stone bed. It turns out, she continued, he really doesn't like me that much. No matter who I marry, he doesn't care. He can easily say that it's my destiny. The voice finally lost its calmness and became stained. She cried a little, just a little bit, as if she was trying her best to suppress it but couldn't, so she had no choice but to let out a little sadness. Today I finally understand that in this world, the only woman who is different from him is Tangqi. For her, he can practice cultivation and come to the mortal world. He is not willing to let Tangqi suffer a little grievance or harm. That is the right thing to do. She looks like her sweetheart. I am really just a pastime. Tears welled up in the corners of her eyes. She raised her right hand in a vain attempt to cover her tearful eyes. I finally understand this and can give up. It was extremely quiet in the cave. Ji Mingfeng looked at Qingyu, who was crying silently, and saw the tears overflowing from her delicate palms, sliding down her cheeks, gathering on her small and delicate chin, and then falling unbearably, staining her clothes. Tonight, he forced her to face reality. Her giving up was exactly what he wanted, but looking at these tears, he began to regret it. Those tears fell on her clothes, just like falling on his heart, and they made him ache every drop. After a long time, he moved, grabbed her body that was crying inwardly, and took away her hand covering her eyes. He looked at her seriously and softly supported and comforted her. There are only you and me here. No one will laugh at you. Ayu, don't suppress yourself. It will feel better if you cry. She was quiet for a while, then opened her eyes. She looked at him, her calm and tearful eyes gradually turned red, her eyelashes began to tremble slightly, and then a small sob finally came out of her throat. He tentatively reached out his hand and patted her back. Cry. It will be okay if you cry. Perhaps she believed in his temptation. The sobs got louder, and she finally couldn't help but burst into tears. The cry was sad and heartbreaking. It sounded in this crimson moon night, and there was an unspeakable pain. Ji Mingfeng felt uncomfortable and couldn't hold it back. He held her thin shoulders and gently and slowly pulled her into his arms. She cried sadly and intently without saying no. End of Lotus Step Chapter 25, Book 2. By Tangqi English translated using Google.